Director of A Better Jamaica. And I'd like to welcome you all to the Southeast Queens Music Education Task Force Summit pre-show. This morning, we have the distinct pleasure of having one of Southeast Queens' own join us to provide a musical introduction to the summit. And I think that makes sense since it's the Music Education Task Force. And that lovely and talented person is none other than Miss Ashley Kiko. So I'm going to turn the show over to Ashley, and in about 20 minutes, I'm going to just sort of ask her some great questions. So welcome, Ashley, and take it over.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I am just so happy to be able to be involved with this Music Education Summit. I, once again, am Ashley Kiko. I am the owner and founder of Kiko Studios Music Academy. We are located on Jamaica Avenue in Queens Village. And we are just so happy to be able to bring music education to our community, not only for children, but adults as well. And I'm also a performing musician. I play alto saxophone and piano as well. So I'm going to play a few selections for you, and I hope you enjoy. This first one is called Remember the Time.
Thank
Thank you, everybody. This next song is called PYT. It's another Michael Jackson song, but this is actually my rendition of it. I recently came out with an album, and this rendition can be found on that album on all streaming platforms. So feel free to check it out. This is called PYT. All right, thank you, everyone. So this next song is actually an original song. It's called Burn Up, and this can also be found on my most recent album. And the name of my album is actually called Pursuit of Harmony as well, so you can find that on all streaming platforms. Thank you, everyone. So that song was called Burn Up. That's an original song. This is actually my last song for the morning. I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. If you are, and if you're able to, please feel free to write in the chat. I would love to kind of feel your energy through the chat. That's always very much appreciated by a musician. So I would love to kind of hear from you guys this morning. So once again, this is my last song. This is a popular one that you'll probably be familiar with, and it's called Leave the Door Open. Thank you, everyone. Oh, and thank you so much for all the comments. I really appreciate it. I want to give a shout out to one of my teachers from when I was in high school, Tom Slavinger. I see that he's in this Zoom call, and so happy to see him here. He definitely played a big role in my musical journey, so big shout out to him.
All right, all right, all right. Can you hear me, Ashley?
Yes.
All right. Well, that was fantastic. And yes, a shout out to Tom Slavinger, because Tom is just, becoming a legend, a York College music professor legend. So shout out to you, Tom. That was fantastic. I've seen you a number of times, had the opportunity to host you a number of times. So it's really easy to just sort of, let me call Ashley Kiko and see if she's available and stuff. So I thank you for that.
Yes.
So I just wanted, you are quite welcome. I just wanted to ask you one question, really, and that is, if you could talk about the role that music education has played in your life in this journey.
Yes. So obviously, music education has played a huge role in my life. Just now being a music educator myself and musician and performing musician, it has really kind of shaped where I am today. And so, ever since I was a young girl, I found myself just being very interested in music and playing instruments. I was really fortunate to be able to go to a school that had some music programs within the school, and this was an elementary school as well. But I happened to see one of my classmates playing piano in school one day, and I just thought that it was so amazing that she could play an instrument, and I was just totally infatuated with it. So I spoke to my parents about it, and they were really supportive and put me and my siblings in piano lessons. And it was actually not even piano, it was organ lessons, which was very difficult, very difficult for someone that's around like 6 years old to play an organ with 2 keyboards and the foot pedals. So that was a lot. And in the beginning, when I started learning that, I was kind of thrown off a little bit. But thankfully, my parents, they really, really encouraged me and pushed me to keep going. And eventually I switched to just keyboard. Mm-hmm. And that, I felt much more comfortable with that. And I just fell in love with it as I started to get to, know the instrument a little better and learn more about the music theory. Mm-hmm. I just kind of fell in love with it. And then later on in middle school and then high school, thankfully I had music programs in those schools. And so I was always, I looked forward to that every single day when I was at school. I know, a lot of kids and everyone's different, but for me in particular, I wasn't so crazy about, math and social studies. I did like science, but some of those other subjects I just wasn't crazy about. And so that music kind of got me through the day. Mm-hmm. And then even after school, it was a nice break from my academic work. And not even just a break, because I was still able to, learn and use my mind in a creative and productive way, which I think is so important for children today. Not to just be on their phones all day, but to, kind of have fun in a different way that, you don't always have to have a screen in your face. Right. So yes, it has really shaped my life. And I am I feel so blessed to be able to have had those experiences, because I know a lot of people in Southeast Queens in particular do not get that experience. So, I just feel super blessed to be able to, say that I was able to have that experience, even if I didn't pursue it in the long run. It was just even great to have it when I was a child.
Right. Now, you said in elementary and middle school, were you taking music classes during the day? Was it a part of the curriculum? So you grew up in Cambria Heights, correct?
Yes.
Right. And you went to elementary and middle school in Flushing, was it?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Right. Yeah. And so did you have music was it a part of the day, or was it an after school opportunity?
So it was actually a part of the day. Okay. In elementary school, we actually had recorder classes. So that's the, little flute instrument. And that was my first musical experience. We had recorder, we had singing, like a glee club. And we also even had violin lessons. So the school was heavily, involved in the arts. And there were a lot of different options that I could choose from. And I actually participated in all of those classes. And it was during the school day.
Right. And that was first in elementary school. And then you went to middle school in Flushing as well. And they had a robust music curriculum there, or no?
Yes, they did as well. So in middle school, I also was a part of the concert band. And that's actually where I got introduced to the saxophone, because, piano was the instrument that I was studying outside of school. I was taking private lessons outside of school, along with, in school having those music classes as well. And then going into middle school, piano, I was getting better at piano at that point. And so I wanted to be in the concert band, but piano was not a band instrument. Right. So I had to choose something. And my dad was like, play the saxophone, because he used to play sax when he was a child, and we had a sax at home as well. So he was like, since you have it at home, you can practice. So choose that instrument. And I really wanted to choose the flute at first.
Wow.
But yeah, I listened to my dad, and I'm glad I did, because I really love the sax now. So
Yes. Now, are there other? So your dad was a musician, was you? Or at least played the sax.
yeah.
How about your mom? Was she a musician as well, or not?
No, she always loved piano. That
Okay.
was like just a, passion of hers. She never actually played until
Okay.
more recently she started taking piano lessons. And she's actually really good too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So she decided to live vicariously, through her daughter playing the piano and stuff.
Yes. Yes. Not even just me. My older sister and my younger brother as well took piano lessons.
Well, she's a parent after my own heart, then,
Yes.
Because if you can't do these things yourself, then, what's the purpose of children other than to provide a vicarious experience and stuff, Yes. Yes. So you, after middle school, and then you went on to high school. Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Bayside High School. So
Bayside High School. That's my alma mater as well.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
That's right. The Commodores, for sure.
Yes.
Yes. So you were bussed, I don't know what they're calling that, across town as well, for your high school experience.
Yeah.
And then after that, where'd you go?
So I went to the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music, and I did my bachelor's in music performance on the saxophone.
Okay.
And then throughout all that time, I had actually been teaching piano lessons. I started teaching, just independently when I was in high school. So throughout all of my high school and college career, I was teaching piano lessons on the side as well. And thankfully, that helped me to afford school. And then I realized that I was loving teaching so much that when I graduated with my bachelor's, I decided to do my master's in music education at Columbia University.
Okay, well, that's excellent. So Teachers College or somewhere else, or some other?
Teachers College, yes.
Got it. So you knew that you were going to just sort of be an arts educator as well as just sort of be a performer and stuff.
Yes.
Right. And so you started your studio straight away, or did you work at another studio? Did you work in schools, or what's that?
So I've actually never worked at another studio before. And the only time I worked in public or private schools was through my student teaching experience. In order to get my master's, I did have to do some student teaching. And so I, got quite a few different experiences through that, teaching in both private schools in a more elementary school age level. And then I've also taught middle school and high school in a few different public schools.
Wow. And that was just sort of all a part of your master's program.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you got experience in the elementary, middle, and high school just within, that degree and stuff. All right. And the studio is doing well?
Yes, it is. We've been open for 4.5 years now. So we're almost near the 5-year mark, and hopefully we'll have a little celebration for that. But yeah, we are just so blessed to have made it through the pandemic.
Yes.
We've been doing lessons virtually and in person. And yeah, we're doing really well.
Yeah. It's a beautiful setup. I've actually been to the studio and stuff. So it's and just help folks, it's on, is that Jamaica Avenue? I always get confused with Jamaica, the Turnpike,
Yes, so it's on Jamaica Avenue and 212th Street.
Jamaica and 212. Okay, and what kind of instruments are you guys?
We do all instruments, piano, guitar, drums, violin, vocals, saxophone, everything. Okay.
Well, I could sit here and talk to you for quite some time, but I'm gonna, in the interest of, us compacting all of this stuff we need to do into 2 hours with this summit, I'm going to segue, but I just wanted to, again, congratulate you on your success as a performer, as a studio, as a business person, as an educator. And I'll point everybody, towards the studio because it's a great place and you're a great person. So,
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Okay. All right. So I guess it is time for us to segue to the official opening of the Southeast Queens Music Education Task Force. For those of you who are just joining us, I am Greg Mays. I am the founder and executive director of A Better Jamaica. And I'll tell you really quickly, just sort of, how this happened. I grew up in a time here in Jamaica, Queens, I went to IS 59. And that was the time when every single student in New York City showed up on the first day of middle school and was either given a hard case or they were pointed to the choral room. And the hard case had an instrument in it, or they were pointed to the choral room. And I luckily, at that time, I probably looked at the hard case and was a little envious, like, well, when am I going to get something? But I was pointed to the choral room. And I had the distinct pleasure of just sort of studying choral music, my first formal training in choral music, under the direction of Anne-Marie Hudley and Miss Chavis, who are legends for all the folks who just sort of went to IS 59 in particular. I can still tell you the songs that we sang. I will not just sort of, burden you with my singing ability, but Going Up Yonder, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and there was even a stylistic song or two just sort of thrown in there. So we're going to hear from the lovely and talented Miss Anne-Marie Hudley later during the show, if you will. So long story short, I knew that there was something missing just sort of in the Southeast Queens just sort of experience. And I said, okay, I am going to convene the Southeast Queens Music Education Task Force. And for the last now, 9 months or so, we've had the pleasure of hosting 7 really distinguished music educators, a little more than half of whom, well, probably 3/4 of whom have worked here in Southeast Queens, plus a couple of folks who have worked outside of Southeast Queens. And we have, they've been complemented by a fantastic group of NYU Wagner School of Public Service students, who you'll hear from as well. So the NYU folks, they did the heavy lifting in that they analyzed all the school reports and the like. And my music educators, I said, look, you don't need to prepare anything. All I want to do is just sort of get whatever is in your brain about music education in Southeast Queens. So we really came together and talked. And again, my NYU folks just sort of captured a ton of what folks were just sort of sharing during these sessions. So I'm going to switch over to our very lovely and talented host, who happens to be the board chair for A Better Jamaica, and her name is Gail Lewis. Gail, are you ready?
For this, Greg Mays, I am ready and excited. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much to Ashley Keiko. Ashley, amazing as always. If you are not if you are unfamiliar with Ashley's work, she is she's just beautiful musically in every capacity. So Ashley, thank you. And if you're looking for music education in our own neighborhoods, please check out Ashley's studio, conveniently located on Jamaica Avenue at the corner of where it meets Hempstead Avenue as well. Convenient to all public transportation as well, and great music and such talent coming out of that studio. So thanks again, Ashley. So good morning, everyone. On behalf of Greg Mays, founder of A Better Jamaica, and myself, Gail Lewis, chair of the board here at A Better Jamaica, it's my pleasure to say good morning to everyone and to welcome you to the Southeast Queens Music Education Task Force Summit. We have a lot of amazing talented music educators today. We have some people who did some amazing work in our communities, collating and gathering information, and it's our pleasure today to make it all available to you. So let's get started. First up today, we have some music educators with us this morning, and they are Southeast Queens Music Education Task Force members Anne-Marie Hudley Simmons, Charles Bartlett, and Carl Bartlett. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Good morning. And good morning to the Bartletts as well.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's great to have you here this morning with us. So I have a few questions for you. We will start with Anne-Marie Hudley Simmons. Can you paint a picture of what once existed here in Southeast Queens as far as music education?
All right. Let me start by saying that I'm a transplant from Chicago, Illinois, where music was very, very important. And I really, I wasn't escaping Chicago. I was coming here mainly to go to Columbia University. But I landed here in the metropolitan area. And just to give you a quick background, this should maybe only take 2 minutes or so. I found the racism in this country so thick. Major head spin. When Dr. Peter Wilhowsky assigned me to a school in Maspeth, and I went, I was told immediately that they had hired all their matrons and they didn't need another matron. And I said to them, I was responding to the music vacancy, and I don't have time to relate to you what happened after I let them know that I was there for a music position. However, this wasn't about me, I found out personally. It was really about children of color. At the time that I came to New York, and I'm the oldest member on this panel, so I was arriving here in the 60s. And at that time, the ratio, I was told, was 40% of children of color against the 60 of the others. And what was really unfortunate was that um, there was very little for children of color to do. I don't care where they were. We were tokens wherever we were. And then we were in pockets of neighborhoods that were Black, then we had less than others did. Fortunately, I arrived at Springfield Gardens Junior High School, as it was called then, IS 59. And here again, the children of color took a backseat to all of the. For example, Carnegie Hall used to have this marvelous music education program, and they would invite students from.
Okay, now good. Very attractive lady talking with gray hair, right? Okay. I think that's everything.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, Anne Marie, you're on mute. I'm sorry. So we missed those last few sentences. Thank you.
No, thank you. I was saying that children of color were not invited to go to Carnegie Hall. The tickets were always given to those other students. And so finally I made a pitch. I said, why is it that every year only these set of children get to go, but the other children, the Black children, do not get to go? And I was told that's because they'll probably misbehave and they'll embarrass us. I said, embarrass us? I think not. I said, I need you to give those tickets to me before I make this public, because this is a shame that in our school, the Black children do not have. So the tickets were thrown at me. All right, take whatever students you want to take. And we took those 90 students on those buses, and we went to Carnegie Hall. And the manager of Carnegie Hall said, where are these children from? And I said, IS 59 in Springfield Gardens. He said, these were the best children we have ever had. How did you do that? I said, how did I do that? Did they have a choice? They came here to hear a concert. They came here to experience something. Those were my expectations. They knew that they were going to, I don't care if, and I mentioned to them before I took them, I don't care if the other kids are hanging over the banisters or over the balcony looking down. You are not doing that. You're representing me, and you're representing our school, and you're representing your culture. You will do what is necessary. It was amazing. And it turned those children who had never been allowed to see that. Now, we're talking about public education. It was amazing. But long story short, but I saw in just a few years from 1966 through the 80s how the complexion of the city changed. And as the complexion changed, we lost the arts. The one thing that drew our kids to the table was now no longer missing. They said, oh, they need more math. They need more reading. And I said, we can get that through the arts. We can get that particularly through music. And having been a child where I didn't like reading and I didn't like math or any of that, but my mother saw that I had a talent and she gave me piano lessons. And as a result, all of a sudden, here I'm speaking Italian and German and all these other languages. I'm knowing how to compute with our time signature. Math became no issue. Reading became no issue. And all of a sudden I became a star student. Sure, I was still 4 years behind my brother, who was 2 years older than I, because I spent 3 years in first grade. However, it was music that rescued me. And I knew, and we have books, we have volumes of information, of research, that music unlocks learning for many children, those who can read already and those who cannot. It's the right and the left side of, that connects the connection through music. So the struggle to reverse the demise, we'll talk about that probably a little bit later, but this is what I saw. I saw them, and we talk about Black Lives Matter. If they really matter, if we really care about Black lives, We don't need to put a Band-Aid on our situation. We have more crime than we've ever had. And most of the children are receiving nothing in our schools. Sure, they get more reading, enough to work at McDonald's. And while that's good for those who have to do that, I dare think, given all of the careers that the music opens up, our young people should be able to go on to do music. They may not sing, they may not play an instrument, they may be first chair, like we do have some first chair players now.
Very
However,
impressive.
right, but we do need to be able to use that skill, that talent to understand and to appreciate. And you only have to go to a Black church and realize the people in the audience had never had Music 101, and the choir didn't either, to understand what we have done.
And we understand why Greg Mays considers you one of his heroes personally. Two things. First, what is that in your background? Please tell everyone.
That's from Chicago. That's the Chicago Orchestra Hall.
Yes. And to the Bartletts, we'd like to bring you in on this conversation as well, both of you. We know your experience with Andrew Jackson, the high school, but what was your middle school experience? What did that once look like?
Okay, I'll let Charles, you want to start?
Okay.
Actually,
our middle school experience was started in Brooklyn, and there wasn't much of a situation there in Brooklyn in terms of instrumental music. In Brooklyn, we attended a school, PS 167 in Brooklyn. It wasn't really, if you want to know, it wasn't really until we got to Andrew Jackson High School. I know you said you know about that, but it wasn't until we got to Andrew Jackson High School that we became involved in an extremely robust music program at the Andrew Jackson High School. But the middle school experience was almost back in our time, which was a little while ago, was almost non-existent.
all right.
And Carl, did you want to add?
Well, okay, I'll add that. Yes, it was non-existent basically in Brooklyn, and not till we got to Andrew Jackson High School that we saw a musical, it's like a group of bands, jazz band, dance band, classical band, marching band. They had 6 bands at Andrew Jackson High School, okay? And that was just remarkable at that time. And what it did for us, it opened our eyes. I remember the first time we had an assembly program, and we heard a band, and they played a tune by Mongo Santa Maria, Pot of Tea, okay? And we heard that band play, and after that, we said, look, and we were first freshmen and sophomores at Andrew Jackson High School. We're gonna get involved with music. And we quickly, within a year's time, we formed our band, Bartlett Contemporaries, okay? And that was way back in the 60s. I just say way back in the 60s, all right? But at that time was a special time because it seemed like all of the schools had a music program. And I'll say that it wasn't until the early 70s that I started teaching as a band teacher, music teacher over at PS 52. That's in Springfield Gardens, 146 Terrace off of Guy Brewer. And I'll tell you, that was a wonderful experience at that time. Elaine Davis was the principal at that time. And it not only did it bring the students together, but it brought the parents together. It brought the community together because we would go cross town from Springfield Gardens all the way over to IS 109 in Queens Village, around the 105th precinct, okay, near Bradhurst in Queens Village. But we would make the annual trip for the spring musical. And for some reason, it was there, either at 109 or it was at 231, which was right on the Conduit Parkway, the Belt Parkway, and Springfield Boulevard. But it was these types of spring musicals where the kids got together and the parents were behind it. And let me tell you, with all due respect, they say, tweeting your own horn, blowing your own horn. But we were fortunate in that we represented, okay, once a year they would have down at 110 Livingston Street in the Grand Hall. They would have one band to represent the city, and we represented the city for 2 years in a row, PS 52. And it was just phenomenal. So I see so many of those students today, and I'll speak with my brother also, because he's in junior high school. So many of those students have gone on to do wonderful things, phenomenal things in music. And I would just say it's a crime that it has been gutted to the extent that it has. And I had the occasion to be back at PS 52 twice in the year 2019. And the first time I went into the auditorium. I just looked at the piano and just everything came back. I visited that school 6 months later. There's no piano in the auditorium. And then when the school age, she said, "Oh, Mr. Bartlett," she said, "you wouldn't want to have been here about just 2 months ago. You heard the piano as they hit it with a hammer, a sledgehammer, bong, bong. They just broke it up." And then as you go around to so many schools in District 29, there are no more pianos in the auditorium. They marching quietly for assembly programs. Okay, so it's a void. And I'll say this quickly. I may pick up on, I don't want to go too far and get ahead of ourselves, so to speak, but you can see the evidence of it. And I'll speak to that later on. But I'm just glad. I want to thank Greg Mays for helping to for putting this thing together, as he does so oftenly, all types of social concerns here in Queens. Okay, so we thank him, and we thank Greg for making it truly a better Jamaica, because this, I believe, is the start of something big.
I just want to jump in and say, I just wanted to jump in and say that my brother was teaching elementary. I was primarily a junior high school band teacher, and our experience as students was one thing, but I'm going to fast forward into my teaching experience, because I think that during I started teaching late 1969 actually, and I, covered this 192 from early 70s, 70 to about 78. But the point I'm trying to make is that even at 192, even then, from 70 to about 78, we had a robust music program. I was able to teach I taught junior band, senior band, and then I had a jazz workshop band where I allowed the students to come in and jam. And they jammed while I was marking papers or doing grades, whatever. They were jamming in the back, and I allowed them to do that after school, and they formed a cohesive unit. Some of these students, I will just say real quickly, and then I'll go, then you can take the next person. Some of these students went on. I have one of my students is the bass player with Dancing on the Stars, Artie Reynolds.
Wow.
One of is Jerry Brooks, who played with Chaka Khan and Bob James. And so one of my students is Camille Gaynor Jones. She's a drummer. And she plays, she just got off the road with Diana Ross tour. They were my band students in junior high. And, to this day, we play together. It's come full circle. They play in my band. Did a gig with Camille a little while ago.
I love her.
Queens has provided, back in the day, I'll say, emphasize a very strong music foundation. And it's the progenitor of Bartlett's contemporaries, and that allowed us to travel halfway around the world.
And another great thing that came out of Southeast Queens music, the Bartlett contemporaries. Thank you, Carl Bartlett. Thank you, Charles Bartlett. And thank you, Anne-Marie Hudley Simmons, for your thoughts on music education. And we are going to fast forward now to the actual results. We have some NYU students, Brittany Edgehill, Katrina Petrulli, and Leah Adelson. Good morning, ladies. And they are going to share their presentation with us today of their capstone presentation. Hi, Leah, I see you on screen. Brittany, I see you as well. And there's Katrina. Good morning, ladies. So we're going to give you some time to present the first part. I'm very excited about this, of your presentation on I'll let you guys talk about it. These ladies are from NYU. Take it away, ladies.
Thank you so much, Gail. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. So if everyone can give me a thumbs up that it is. Oops.
And can I also say, Leah, if anyone has any questions, just put them in the chat for us. Thanks.
All right. And can everyone see my screen? Fantastic. Good morning. And thank you all so much for being here. We are so thrilled to have the opportunity to present to you. And we have had the privilege of working with Greg and the many incredible music educators, past and present, of Southeast Queens. So my name is Leah Adelson. I am a full-time student at NYU Wagner School of Public Service, and I'm pursuing my master's in public administration. I am originally from Philadelphia. And I previously worked at the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice prior to graduate school. For some quick context, the NYU Wagner MPA program consists of a year-long capstone, which addresses challenges and identifying opportunities for clients. And we had the opportunity to work with A Better Jamaica. So now I will hand it off to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Leah. And my name is Brittany Etcho. I'm actually born and raised in Queens, New York. So this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I'm currently a program administrator at NYU School of Global Public Health, and I'm pursuing my MPA in Management and Leadership. And now I'll turn it over to Katerina.
Thanks, Brittany, and good morning, everyone. My name is Katerina Patori, also born and raised in Queens, New York, currently working in government affairs and capital projects at an arts institution in Brooklyn called BAM, and very excited to be here with you today.
Great. So we are going to start out. Here's just a brief agenda outlining what we're going to be going through this morning, and we're going to start with our purpose. So as I previously mentioned, we had the amazing opportunity to work with Greg and A Better Jamaica for our year-long capstone project. And we were tasked to develop an assessment that included both a qualitative and quantitative analysis of music education offerings in Southeast Queens. We were also part of the Southeast Queens Music Education Taskforce, SEQMET, and you've met some of the members already. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that later. But that was really helpful to source the qualitative and anecdotal information about both the current and past state of music education in Queens. Our final report includes these analyses and findings, as well as recommendations about expanding music education in Queens middle schools. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the methods we use to accomplish the methods of this project. So our first method was the collating and summarizing of key arts data across the middle schools in 4 districts in Southeast Queens. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in specifics in the next slide. We also conducted data analysis and created data visualizations to help convey our findings of the trends. We collected qualitative data through our meetings with the task force. And finally, we conducted an academic literature review to help contextualize the music education space. So as I mentioned, the data was compiled from the New York City Annual Arts and Schools Reports for the academic year 2019 to 2020. And here on this slide is an example of one of those reports. These reports include survey responses and records from various city databases. And we went through and we pulled data from individual middle schools from the 4 districts in Queens if it was available. This includes school demographic data, whether dance, music, theater, or visual arts programming is provided, the percentage of students participating in the arts, number of full-time teachers, and more. But we focus specifically on data around music education. So on that last slide, I said, if available, about the data polls, and that is what the slide speaks to. So you'll see that there are more middle schools in the districts than there are reports polled. And the data for charter schools weren't available. So ultimately, we looked at 61 middle schools out of 70 total middle schools in the focused area. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our findings and the trends we saw through this data that we pulled. We're going to start with some more macro data visualizations, which showed the aggregated graphs that we created before we delve into some of the more specific school visualizations. But the following slides really speak to just an unequal offering of the arts on average, even within Queens. So this first graph, it might look familiar, represents the average offering of music education in these school districts on a scale of 0 to 3. 0 means that music classes are not offered at all. 1 for 1 grade, 2 for 2, and 3 meaning they offer it for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. Now it's juxtaposed against the citywide average as a benchmark, which is that music education is offered at an average of 1.98 years of middle school citywide, so just under 2 years of music education. We see that District 26 is well above the citywide average at 2.28 years on average, and District 27 is just below at 1.86 years. The 28th and 29th districts are well below the citywide average, showing that these middle schools are not offering music education at a comparable frequency to either the 26 and 27 districts, as well as the citywide average. So on the left here, we have the same graph from the last slide, just as a comparison. But we see on the right that across all 4 of the measured districts, the 26 has by far the lowest average enrollment in music classes, yet the highest amount of music education offered. While we can't really get into the why without extensive interviews, some qualitative conversations led us to believe that it could be a result of optionality and that there are many other offerings that students prefer to take. In contrast, the 29th district has the lowest amount of music participation, music offered, but the significantly higher rate of participation. Again, we can't know for sure why this is the case, and we would need additional data from surveys and interviews to establish any qualitative explanation for this discrepancy, but it's an interesting trend nonetheless that we wanted to share. Now, this slide is looking at a breakdown of percentage of schools offering 0 to 3 years of music education by district. We see again that the 29th has the highest percentage of schools offering 0 years of music education, meaning none at all, while the 26th district has a whopping 71% of schools in the district offering music education for all 3 grades, 6 through 8. Again, we have the same graph from earlier showing the average number of years music education is offered by district, so we can juxtapose it against the average district demographic information. We see the 26th is majority Asian students, which is shown in blue, and it has the lowest percentage of Black students of the 4 districts shown in orange. On the other hand, the 29th is majority Black students, again in orange. While there are many other factors to consider, and this doesn't tell us anything about the breakdown of student music education enrollment by demographic, it reveals that the district with the highest percentage of Black students has by far the lowest opportunity to engage in music education. And that echoes what Ms. Hudley said earlier. One important thing to note here is that the average demographic data in the 27th, 28th, and 29th districts do not reach 100%. And that's due to some flaws in the source data. The New York City arts reports have inconsistencies, with some school demographics adding up to above or less than 100%, which is an obvious limitation in the data, but we don't really believe it changes the trend that we're seeing here, especially since it's super consistent with national trends that we'll get into later. So next, we're going to look at a tool that we built to observe on a school-by-school basis, rather than the aggregated basis that we've been talking about. And I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Katerina, and we're going to take questions about all of the data following her presentation of this tool. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Leah. So what Leah has pulled up here is a tool that we really wanted to focus on creating as part of our work here. It was really a way for us to transform the data we found in the arts reports into an easily and publicly accessible map. The goal was for us to really increase the transparency and tracking of how each school is actually performing, so that this information is not buried in an arts report and can be read more widely. You see here, we've divided it into school district, community board, and city council district in order to advocate with those specific groups. These maps show each individual middle school, which is represented by a dot, and then whether it offers 0, 1, 2, or 3 years of music education, which is shown in gradient from red to yellow. When you hover over each district, you can also see student demographic data and rate of participation in the programs. You can see sort of, as Leah was describing in our earlier slides, the clusters of red dots, which represent middle schools that offer no music education in any middle school grades. You can see those clustered in School District 29 and the southern part of School District 27. So this is really a tool that we wanted to create so that educators, parents, really any stakeholders in the community can see how each individual school is performing based on the data pulled from the school year 2019-2020. And with that, we wanted to pause for a moment and see if anyone had any questions at all on the data that we've presented thus far. There will be, of course, opportunity for questions later, but we just wanted to pause here for a moment.
I don't see any questions right now. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat as well. All right, Katerina, Brittany, Leah. Okay, we have one question we've got a comment from Erica Ford. Erica Ford, did you want to just put that back in the chat? There we go. And also one from Claudette Morgan. If you guys could put those back in the chat for us, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and I just want to comment on what Claudette said. Absolutely.
Thank you.
We by no means were suggesting that for the 29th, but for the 26th, that was a possible explanation for why there was such low participation with so many opportunities for enrollment. But for the 29th, that is absolutely not an explanation. So thank you for that comment. If there's anything else.
And thanks for that. Thank you for that clarification as well. Is there a map that identifies each school district in Southeast Queens? That's another question.
So if we go back to this, and I can let Katerina speak to that.
Yes, thank you. So that's this top left version of the map that you see right here. If you hover over, you can see those are the school districts 26, 27, 28, 29. For our project, 27, 28, 29 are really the focus for Southeast Queens, and 26 is more of a comparison district, technically outside of the bounds of Jamaica.
Thank you. No other questions at this time, so we're going to let you continue. Thanks again, Katerina, Leah, and Brittany.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much for those questions. And again, thank you for that comment, which allowed us to clarify. So next, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Brittany, who will speak about our qualitative findings.
Thank you so much, Leah. So we've all been on the call and we've had a chance to meet the Southeast Queens Music Education Taskforce, but I just want to take a moment to really just share a little bit about our process and how we came together with the task force. So we lovingly call them SEQMET, and they have been our rock throughout this project. They're brought together by Greg Mays on the call. Thank you so much. And we met initially in November 2021. And with a clear mission that we want to restore and advance music education access for children in Southeast Queens. As we shared, the group is composed of 7 amazing educators, musicians, administrators, and artists who collectively have over 70 years of music education experience within New York and Long Island. And through a series of meetings, they not only informed our qualitative work, but they also inspired us through their personal recollections and also historical anecdotes of music education within New York City, all of which has added depth and context and a very personal charge to the work that we were doing thus far. So as such, we're showing the faces and the names of the SEQMET members because throughout our presentation, you'll see quotes and bits of wisdom scattered throughout our presentation that we want to share with you all. And they are brilliant leaders and experts. And as advisory coalition for this charge, we know that the work will extend much further and really take it to another level. Thank you. Next slide, please. Timeline. So as Leah and Katerina have demonstrated through their data, we know that the availability and access of music education is not equal for everyone. And we know that factors such as socioeconomic status and demographic makeup can impact the availability and accessibility. But what we also learned throughout this project is that historical events and also policies from both the federal and also state and local level have an intrinsic impact on the funding for arts. And it subsequently has undermined the music education funding and also sometimes the perceived value of music education over the years. So as such, from our literature review and also from our meetings with SEQMET, we created this timeline that provides a very high level overview of some of the key events, policies, and papers that has led us to this point thus far. And I'm just going to take a moment to highlight a couple of them that I think are particularly relevant. So if you look on the left-hand side in 1950, one that is very interesting in our research that we found was that in 1957, when the Russian Sputnik satellite went up, it's really ignited this hysteria in American society that American education cannot keep up or is not being competitive with the global education system. And as such, there was really this narrative that began to form that we need to focus on the STEM, the math, the science that's going to make us competitive. And as such, in that narrative, the arts slowly became less and less of a focus. Then in 1970s, and this is something that we've heard predominantly from the Taskforce members, and also it's really a focus in the literature, was the financial crisis that was also throughout the US, but it hit particularly hard in New York City. And this financial crisis really cut the arts funding dramatically. So there was a 25% layoff in art teachers at this time, which honestly, New York City has never recovered from since. Then there began the conversion of art rooms and music rooms into other spaces, such as computer labs, and just for other purposes. And lastly, there was a decline in training programs for art instructors. Then equally, the same trend translated into the 1980s and 1990s, where there was a vast decline in art education in New York City public schools, and about 2/3 of all schools did not have a licensed art or music instructor. Then another thing that we wanted to address or highlight is also a Nation at Risk report. And this is a very familiar report for those in education, but this came out in 1983. And this really added that same fuel to the fire of igniting concerns about the quality of American schools. And by that, it cited like dropping test scores and lagging international competitiveness. And the report recommended 5 new basic subjects that schools should focus on. And that was math, the science, ELA, but the arts and music were not mentioned at all. And similarly, in 2001, under the George Bush administration, we all are familiar with the No Child Left Behind Act. And that was really the pinnacle of when we based so much of our performance in school and education based upon standardized test scores and exams. And consequently, that act has also led to a decline in budgets for music programs because school administrators and principals feel that they need to allocate more funds towards the things that they're getting tested upon or the subjects in which they're getting ranked upon in their school. So I bring these all up because I want to also show that there's been policy level that has impacted music education, but there also has been moments and throughout history that there has been a resurgence, and as I would say, in terms of funding for the arts. And it happens in almost every presidential campaign and mayoral campaign. So for instance, we want to highlight in Mayor Giuliani, he started the Project Arts Initiative, which was grant-based in order to provide funding for schools to start the arts. Then also equally, Mayor Bloomberg started the Arts Count Initiative, which added arts metrics into schools' performance. So that then allowed schools to be ranked upon their arts performance in order to receive funding. And then most recently in 2014, Mayor de Blasio allocated $23 million to the arts and music based upon a report that came out from the comptroller that really detailed how music education arts were not being offered to Black and Brown students throughout New York City. So this is just a very high level overview, but it's also very helpful to look at to kind of gain a better context and also a larger look at the state of music education, not only in New York, but also this translates into many other major cities across America. And the last tidbit that I'd like to highlight is that the gradient in the timeline is intentional because that reflects also a changing demographic in New York City. So in 1950s, New York was approximately, and this is based upon US Census data, it was approximately 60% white. And then as decades have gone on, the city has become more Black and brown and more international population. And with that change, we also see the difference in funding. We see the difference in access and opportunity. So we think that that is a layer to this issue that needs to be further addressed.
Ladies, I have 2 points of clarification questions for you from the audience. If we could, I think they'd fit in right now, right well with the mapping that you just provided. First, in which district is Jamaica located?
I'm going to let Katarina answer that one.
Thanks. So Jamaica Queens is primarily District 28 in the school districts that we looked at, but we've defined Southeast Queens as a whole as 27, 28, and 29. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. And one more clarification question. When you ID, quote unquote, music education is provided, does that mean that it's provided by a state licensed music teacher and fulfills the New York State learning standard in the arts? Or is something less rigorous or less substantive provided?
That's a really great question. Thank you for that, Nick. So the Arts and Schools reports, it's yes and no. It does represent education provided by a licensed educator, but it does not clarify the extent of which that education is provided. So in other words, the amount of hours per week, which is the learning standard set out by the state curriculum. So we don't know if they're providing enough of that or if it's as rigorous as it can be, but yes, it is tracking education provided by certified teachers.
Thank you, and please continue.
Absolutely. And I see another comment that we will make this slide available and it will go out. So just to end on my final note that the gradient just reflects a change in demographics throughout New York City that we think is also incredibly relevant to this conversation. Next slide, please. And this quote from Anne Marie Hudley speaks exactly upon that topic. Since our schools are now primarily children of color, let's make certain that they're not left behind, especially in terms of music education and music access. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about our literature review. So we know that there is an abundance of research that shows there's a correlation between music education and academic achievement, but it also strengthens a number of other things for students as well, such as social ties in schools and communities that ultimately enhance their civic engagement. Also equally important, childhood exposure to music and the arts increases their likelihood of lifelong engagement with the arts throughout the lifespan. And that really should be the intention. And when we're thinking about providing students with music education, we want them to be lifelong consumers and producers of music. Similarly, we have these other major bullets of cognitive development, academic achievement, and also social-emotional behavioral development that all benefit students and enhances their confidence and their self-motivation. Next slide, please. But what our literature review did reveal is that there's an inequitable trend in terms of music access being available to all students. So despite all these benefits that we do know, studies have continued to show that Black and brown students, low-income students, first-generation students have fewer opportunities than more affluent students, both inside and outside of public schools. So we know the issues that have impacted music education, and we know the benefits. Now we want to know what helps music education succeed. So the first bullet is consistent and high standards of music education. At the moment, there's a lack of clear standard for music education across the country. Every school has a different program and structure and content, which oftentimes is dependent upon the location, the instructor, school leadership, or even the district. This devaluation and inconsistency of arts courses results in administrators and principals, especially those who don't know the value of music in a student's life, to cut instructional time for the arts, or they might decide to allocate funding elsewhere. Therefore, we say consistent and high standards allow for equitable music education across all schools. The next thing is embedding arts in the core curriculum. So legislation over the last 5 decades has placed more emphasis on core classes, the maths, the science, the language arts, but it has decreasing opportunities for students to enroll in music education. That's consequently. States and schools districts have removed music classes from the required core curriculum, or they do not offer music credits for graduation. Therefore, embedding arts within the core curriculum and making it mandatory for students is what's needed. And then lastly, increase school leadership support for the arts and funding. And we've touched a bit about this throughout, but this is one of the most critical factors for success. Having that support and buy-in from leadership, from principals. We've heard about this firsthand from SEQMET and from the literature, that the principal wields the most power and influence over how funds are dispersed within schools. So as such, principals can have a direct impact on the success or failure for a music program before it even begins. So that's why we need buy-in from leadership. And we also need parents as well to kind of apply that pressure to leadership to allocate funding towards music education. And next slide, please. So now I want to take a moment. If you have any questions about the timeline or the literature review, I'd be happy to answer them.
We do have another question. Did you delineate music education into music performance, music history, and other disciplines? They're curious if students are performing music versus music appreciation.
So overall, in our research, we lumped it all together. Meaning that you looked at music appreciation and music performance, and we looked at that as a whole. We didn't differentiate in between. Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions at this time.
Okay, so now I think before we go into the next portion, which is recommendations, I think we're going to pause here and we will get back to that a little bit later in the programming.
Thank you, ladies, for that first part of your presentation. We are going to move on now to City Council Speaker Adrian Adams. She's here. Good morning. Is it still morning? Yes, it is. Good morning, Council Member and Speaker Adams. How are you this morning?
Good morning to you. Good morning to everyone. I'm doing well this morning on this fine, freezing, rainy Saturday.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning at the Southeast Queens Music Education Task Force Summit. We're looking forward to your thoughts and also what you have to say about this. How do you think we got to where we are now? And what can we do in the short, the medium, and the long term? I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. And I want to thank Brittany and, NYU Wagner, for your findings, for explaining the findings. And I can't forget to, of course, thank the amazing and marvelous Greg Mays for lauding over A Better Jamaica all these years. Great job as always. And thank you, Greg, for always being so committed, to learning and the cause of learning. This is such an important subject for all of us that really do, number one, love music, love our children, love our community, love our history. So hearing these findings is very, very telling for me. And Gail, you and I have known each other for a very long time. For me, everything, like I said, goes back to history. It goes, and the timeline, the timeline says everything. As far as the years when the demographics changed, how concentration and focus on our community's color changed, where the love and care, as far as decision makers and lawmakers, where that changed. It all comes back down to me to an elimination of education. And the demographics tell the full story. Where have we people of color always seen historically the lack of, let's just say, the powers that be wanting us to get ahead, wanting us to know, have knowledge or move on? And that's been in our space of education. From slavery, we were encouraged and we were warned and we were killed because of education. And don't you dare find a book, have a book, and be taught to read. It's education. So fast forward, to where we are over the years and seeing where we flourish in some of the highest spaces in the United States. It's music, it's the arts. It's the thing that we created when it comes to jazz, when it comes to doo-wop, when it comes to hip hop, when it comes to all of that, when it comes to the great Motown sound. Now we're going to pull that away from our students. You can't learn to play the trumpet. You can't learn to play the clarinet. You can't learn to take your instruments home. We're not even going to give you instruments anymore. We're going to take them away, just like they took our books away. So to me, it's a reversal once again in watching this timeline and watching this progression and watching systemic racism rear its ugly head for all of us to see. Now we see it because of these findings. Again, I applaud you, NYU Wagner, for bringing these findings out and for sharing them, really, so that we can express these findings wherever we go. I know that I'm going to express it, not that I'm not expressive enough, but this just fortifies me, to be even more expressive when it comes to the lack of this teaching in our schools, why it's happening and why we have to stop it and bring this forth so that our children can continue to thrive in that thing that is in them, that's just yearning to come out.
Thank you, Council Member and Speaker Adams. I have another question for you. I don't know if everyone in Southeast Queens knows, but you are a prolific singer and practicer of the musical arts through your voice. Has that, and we're looking at music education here today, how has you being such a lover of music and such a prolific singer yourself, how has that helped you in your pursuit of education? I know you attended an HBCU. Were there times maybe that got you through your education or gave you motivation in your education?
Oh, Gail, yeah. Well, I've been singing since I could talk, and probably before. My earliest memories, I was about 2 years old. So I came from a household where my parents shared the doo-wop experience, where my sister and I lived, the Motown sound. And as teenagers, where we just lost our minds, finding the funk. So, through it all, it's been music in my home, and in the home that my husband and I, built for our children growing up. They even, are historical music buffs. But for me, even if I couldn't sing, per se, it would still be the music that's been that escapism that takes me to another place. When it comes to wanting to reach another dimension, when it comes to meditation, when it comes to facilitation, even in background noise, it's always been the music. And music it's taken me through a lot of great places and some low places as well, because no matter the genre, we always find ourselves somewhere in someone's writing of that music and someone else's words. That we can always hearken to in our lowest moments, whether, I used to play a little piano. Hi, Sister D. Berry. I used to play a little piano. I can still sight read a little bit, and it's just that escapism that, that tends to center us. And it's tended to center me, with the gift of sound, with the gift of, vocal talent. So
did you sing? I'm sorry, did you sing in middle school? Did you take music education? Was that available to you in middle school, in high school, throughout your school education?
well, I started, well, let's just say that I'm a ham at nature. So give me a microphone and I'm gonna I'm gonna do something with it. But I did start out my collegiate studies in studying music theory at York. I went to York for a year and a half before I transferred to Spelman. So I did study music theory, wanting to take that vocal, the love for, singing someplace else. But then I learned very quickly that I don't like music theory. I was I was getting bogged down into, and for all of you that do music so greatly, I'm sorry, but
those are fighting words amongst the
music
panelists today, music educators. I'm just giving you fair warning.
It's for some. That wasn't my ministry. So I had to back off of the music theory and stick with just the vocal stuff that was fun for me. So I ended up changing my major after about a year or so of studying the Baroque period and, all those beautiful things and listening to concertos and, listening to it was wonderful. Studying it was, something else. So, yeah. So the answer to your question is yes, I did do some study in high school. I was a part of concert choir, a concert chorus at Bayside for all 4 years at Bayside High School, then coming into
another Bayside High School.
Yes. And graduating from Bayside and going into York, studying music theory for a year or so. Then going down to Spelman, I did, study psychology at Spelman, but I always had a part of music with me, even in college. So I always found some group. I was a part of the Atlanta Gospel Movement when I was at Spelman, and that was a fantastic collaboration of all of the schools in the downtown Atlanta area where we sang gospel music. So it's always been a part of me.
And one last question, council member or Speaker Adams. There are New York City and New York State music standards in place presently. So what do we do when schools are not meeting those standards? What should we do?
I think that we've got to call them out. We certainly can't be silent when it comes to information that needs to be made public. I think that we need to bring that information. Gail, you and I know the importance of the community boards. We bring that out into public forums like our civic meetings, like our community boards, like our PTAs, and we start to question these things and we hold people accountable, for their lack of teaching our children what they need to learn. So that's my answer. Make it public. I don't like to use the word shame because I don't like to shame people, but we need to make it public so that folks are held accountable for the things that they are not doing when it comes to the interest of teaching our children.
And one last comment, Speaker Adams, Professor Tom says that he heard you sing Jamaica Funk and you killed it. So FYI. And with that, any parting words? Any parting words, Speaker Adams, before we let you go?
Well, Jamaica Funk, that's what it is. Let it get into you. So now this is a magnificent summit for all of you that love music as much as I do. My hat's off to you. Please continue this discussion, continue this work. It's so needed. We've got to bring it back in our schools, and we're doing what we can in the council, of course, to continue funding the arts, funding our culturals, trying to make this curriculum come back very strongly in our schools, which we have to do. And we're going to do our part. And we thank you so much for doing your part. Southeast Queens makes it happen all the time. And for us, there is no greater funk than Jamaica Funk.
Ladies and gentlemen, council member and of course, Speaker of the City Council, Speaker Adrian Adams. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and have a great morning and keep singing.
Oh, I will as much as they will let me these days.
Sing it out. Thanks so much. I won't make you sing this morning, but I will reserve the right to ask you in the future.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Gail.
Great morning. Thank you. So as we move along, everyone, we have part 2 of our presentation from our NYU Wagner students. But before we get to that, let's just take a moment to speak with Priscilla Baskerville, Barbara DeBerry, Anne-Marie Hudley Simmons, Charles and Carl Bartlett one more time. Good morning to all of you again.
Good morning.
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 Again.
Good morning again. Everyone's back on screen. So we spoke already with a few of you. So I do have a few questions for Priscilla Baskerville especially. I know that you are our teacher. So tell us what you do, and also what were you seeing as a teacher at LaGuardia?
Well, hi, good morning, everyone. Yes, when I was teaching at LaGuardia, it was just really, for me, an avenue to express my passion for music. And I was sometimes very blessed to find other students who were just as passionate about it. But unfortunately, not all were, because what has happened over the years at LaGuardia is that it's become it's all about the academics. And for 6 years under one of our principals, it was all about the grades as opposed to the talent. So that I saw a decrease in talent. I loved the idea that I had some students who were equally as talented in music as they were in the academics. They were talented in both. However, the bulk of them were not. And it broke my heart, because I, as an alumnus of Music and Art High School, those were the best 3 years of my life. And everyone in there, it was like there was a healthy competition, a healthy spirit, musical spirit. So I just saw a decline. I'm sorry. I just saw a decline. So hello. I just saw a decline in the talent portion. However, the ones that came from affluent neighborhoods or affluent families and who had the money to invest in music outside of school, I found that they were quite advanced. They were quite advanced, and I felt sorry for the others who weren't. As you know, it's a specialized high school, so you auditioned to get there. And I just thought, wow, there's so many people that are disadvantaged that want to come here but can't get in here for either their lack of music, even appreciation, and there's no teaching. They're not getting anything like theory or how to read music or anything like that, and they're coming here wanting to be here so badly, and they can't get in. So I did see a decrease in the talent portion, and because of the high grades that were demanded of them. So yeah, that's what I saw.
And also, and I know I've had this experience as well. What was the difference? Just tell me about your happy birthday story.
Oh yes, this is when they come to audition for our schools, and it wasn't just the Bronx, but every time it was Bronx Day, my heart was just so filled with sadness, because they had no idea of what they should audition with. They had no idea. They would come with a hip hop song or something they've heard on the radio, which is where they get or YouTube. This is where they're getting their education from now. It has nothing to do with having been taught what it's about, and all this goes back to for me back to the 70s, when they said, okay, arts teachers, you're going to be cut. So the kids were more or less on their own to find their way in music, and started doing whatever they could do, the breakdancing, the rap, everything that they could do back then, and without any guidance, without any music guidance. So the Bronx, I mean, they'd sing something and we had no idea whether or not they had control of the pitch, because probably the songs they were singing, we didn't know. We didn't know the song. So we couldn't tell if they were on pitch or if this was how the song went. So we had to ask them to sing something that we knew, like Amazing Grace or Happy Birthday.
Or Happy Birthday.
They'd have to come in and sing Happy Birthday, and hopefully they would stay on pitch, and and you know, sometimes they wouldn't stay on pitch with happy birthday. And I had to say, it's not because they're not singing these things. Their ears are not attuned to music anymore. So, you know, we try to find all sorts of ways to get around it because we could see the passion in them, but there was nothing we could do when they couldn't come up to task for at least having a good ear for it, you know? It's very sad, very sad. So that was one of the things that I noticed in the with that, but I just want to continue to just a little bit is in that I had in elementary school I had music, you know, if it was just recorders.
And middle school as well?
But in elementary, middle school, what happened with that was that I was in a class in elementary school that when you went to junior high school, they sent you to either the class that had a language or had accelerated education or music. And she sent me to the one with the language, you know, so I couldn't get a recommendation from the teachers to go for all city chorus or all borough chorus. I couldn't get anything.
Which is surprising because, I'm sorry to interrupt, it's surprising because you went on to be an opera singer?
Yeah, you know, I was very, very, very lucky. I just say when the fates are there, they're there. Because I had no recommendation to go to all borough high school chorus auditions because they wouldn't give it to me. But I just went, you know, and thank God Mr. Yearwood was just like, you know, I was sitting there and I had no recommendation. So when he announced that everybody with their recommendation should go to room 110, I just sat there and I was sitting there alone. And he said, I said, go to room 110. He yelled at me. I said, okay, I'll go to room 110. So I went to 110 and that started my whole music, everything in junior high school with Mr. Motley going on to all city high. They even had all city junior high school then. And then all city high school chorus and then music and art. So I was just very blessed that someone yelled at me and told me to go anyway. You know, so that was
and in turn, we are blessed because you're giving it back and you became an opera singer and you got to practice, and it all came from your middle school experiences.
It did, it really did. Even though I didn't get music in school, it all came from having the passion to go after it, even without the recommendation, because they didn't give it to me, and I didn't get it in junior high school, although it was offered in my school. I just wasn't in that class that got music. You see, it was a hook though.
And just to continue with the middle school conversation, I'd like to bring in Barbara DeBerry here as well. What were you seeing when you were at IS 59? And why don't you think IS 59 has a music teacher on staff?
All right, that's a very good question, and I thank you for it. Good morning to everyone. Glad to see you once again. And Sister Speaker Adams and I were alto partners, a part of Alto Nation at the Greater Allen Cathedral of New York Mass Choir. So it's good to see you, and I can vouch for her singing ability personally. So, but IS 59. I was at IS 59 for 20 years, and I experienced a slow but steady decline in arts programming there. When I first started, students were programmed for music by choice. Not an audition per se, but it was something that these students actually wanted to pursue. Music studies and performance were taken seriously. We handled George Frederick Handel as well as Fred Hammond. We sang Baroque and Broadway to the approval of parents and administrators and colleagues alike. Over time, music began to be programmed as a filler, as a prep provision, and oftentimes as a dumping ground for students with difficulties in other classroom settings. Our performance venue changed from Colden Center at Queens College, where we produced a magnificent spring concert in the tradition of my predecessor, Anne Marie Hudley Simmons. I adopted her choral classroom. But we produced a marvelous concert, spring concert, with the band and the chorus as well. That venue changed to the school auditorium. And that was a red light. That was an indicator of where things were going. It was financial, or so it was said, that we couldn't afford to use the Colden Center any further. The importance, as has been stated already, shifted from the arts to the academics. And I believe that IS 59 has no music teacher now because there's no longer an importance placed on it. It's not a priority in that school budget that we've been talking about, that the principals have control over. And I don't think that the parents are requesting or demanding it either. That was also a very important piece in our puzzle, was the attitude, the involvement, the love, the encouragement of the parents who realized that music was an important part of their children's education. And it's just within our culture, music is a high point, it's a highlight, it's expected of us. I don't know what's happening now. Like Priscilla said, it's YouTube, it's what's readily available. I remember telling my kids every day that life was not a music video, because that's what they came to school trying to portray or trying to be, especially for the young sisters. Life is not a music video, and that's not cool. So those are mine. That's my 2 cents about the status, the demise of music programming. In District 29, I could speak for District 29 and maybe 6 or 7 years in District 28. But District 29 was, it was a jewel, musically, artistically, okay? You could call on any school, any music program, IS 231 chorus, IS 59 chorus, and the band under the direction of, well, while I was there was Professor Pam Smith, who had those kids talking, you know? And it's very sad to see what has happened to that, where schools are not, they're not teaching 3-year programming in music. They have no musical outlets for the children. It's just very, very sad. What happens to the kids? What happens to society? Where are our music teachers going to come from? Where are the composers going to come from if they're not exposed to and encouraged to follow music? So that's my 4 cents. I'm sorry.
No problem. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your comments on where we're going next here. We are going to find out a little bit more about where we're going next. Now we're going to go back to our NYU students for the last half of their presentation. So we're going to ask for Leah, I see Leah, Katerina, and also Brittany to come back on and share their presentation. And then we'll go back to some more comments from our music educators in just a bit. So we're going to go back to the NYU team, and they're going to share a little bit more of their presentation. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you everyone for all of these really thoughtful questions and comments about our work, and again, for the fantastic music educators. I mean, a lot of what they were speaking to is what we heard during our SEQMET meetings and really informed a lot of our research and a lot of our kind of anecdotal and qualitative research. So thank you so, so much. And for this last portion of our presentation, I'm going to hand it over to Katerina, who is going to speak on our recommendations.
Thank you, Leah. So we just want to touch on 4 key recommendations that we have for what we can do next, and how we can actually work toward bringing back robust music programming to these schools in Southeast Queens. So our first recommendation, which is sort of in process already, is to build a coalition to kind of lead this work forward. In many ways, we see this as a kind of natural expansion and extension of the SEQMET Taskforce. We envision that the SEQMET team can kind of act as an advisory group and expand a coalition to include some of the stakeholders we've been talking about: community boards, parents, teachers unions, youth mentors, representing all the districts and really taking part in this coalition to lead the charge on the ground. We see this group convening meetings, sharing resources, accessing funding streams, conducting unified advocacy together, and then also tracking progress across all the individual schools to see how performance is improving or not. And then we also see this group as acting as a way to inform and educate parents on what there was here before, on all these past offerings, because some of what we've learned is that this collective memory, it can disappear, and really we see this coalition as an educating force for parents who might not know and can therefore mobilize their support. So that we recommend kind of begins here at this summit and expands beyond to lead this work forward. Our next recommendation is conducting a legislative campaign to strengthen music education in 2 ways. One is to increase funding to schools, and the other is to strengthen the requirements in the core curriculum. So we see this as legislation on the city and state levels. The coalition can work to identify sponsors, elected officials who might be in support of this and are willing to put forward bills that increase the number of mandated arts instruction hours for middle school students, and also increase funding streams directly to these schools that currently are providing little to no instruction. And we see the coalition also working to build community support to push these legislators through various events, education events, rallies, marketing materials, getting people together, and conducting legislative campaigns that really can bring this forward. This is a complicated and time-consuming process, but we really think that this is a great way to ensure that music education is consistent and also lasts in the long term, and isn't just sort of based on a particular person's support, as great as that can be. If that person leaves, then so does the programming. So we really see this as the kind of backbone of ensuring that this work can be sustained for the long term. Our next recommendation focuses on increasing school leadership support of music education and resources allocated to music education in schools. So we've seen how important it is to have administrators, principals in schools in support of these programs. This is really what this recommendation focuses on. We suggest beginning with the middle schools that currently offer the fewest programs, the fewest years of learning, seeking meetings with leaders in those schools to see what the barriers are, advocate for the return of programs, and really hold them accountable, as Speaker Adams was saying before. We also recommend identifying researchers who can work to compare academic success in core subjects between the schools that offer music education and those that do not. We think that there's positive correlation between high achievement in core subjects and music participation. Having that data would be a great way to build the support for school leaders. And then, of course, ensuring that all schools have certified arts teachers on staff, and then conducting a survey of the classrooms that have been repurposed, once used for arts education and now used for something else. And then working toward reclaiming these spaces so that they're focused on arts instructions. We really think that building the support within the administrators is incredibly important, so that each school can actually have this access and offering to students. And finally, our last recommendation is working to establish more partnerships between schools, school administrators, and cultural institutions to further exposure to music education for students and parents, but primarily to have this be supplemental to instruction going on during the day and as part of the curriculum. This is not meant to replace that instruction, but is really meant as a supplement to provide enrichment in addition to what's going on in school. This is important because as we've heard from our SEQMET members, it can be very hard if a student has not had the exposure in elementary school or middle school for that student to find an entry point back into music education as they continue on to high school. So building up this exposure is important. Bolstering these partnerships with institutions based in Queens, but also citywide, is a great way to provide that in-school and after-school support. We see advocacy with the Department of Cultural Affairs as important here to increase the funding for schools to actually be able to pursue these partnerships. And again, making sure that these are supplemental to in-school curriculum. So those are some of the recommendations, the main recommendations that we have put together from our findings, our data, and also the wisdom of our task force members. And our final slide here is really a quote from Miss Anne-Marie Hudley Simmons that has always grounded our work and shows the importance of why we're here. Music is not a minor subject, it's a major subject. And of all the arts, it is the foundation for everything else. So we hope these recommendations are kind of starting point for this group to talk through and see how we might put them into action. And we just thank everyone for all their wisdom in terms of putting these together.
Thank you all so much for your time. We're happy to answer any questions on our project, but also to open up for general questions and comments for the whole group of experts that we have here today. So again, thank you for the opportunity to present our findings.
If everyone can join me in thanking Leah Adelson, Brittany Edgehill, and Katerina Paturi. Thank you so much for all of your hard work for this entire semester. I know this was your capstone project. Well done. Any questions for our NYU team? It looks like you might have covered all the bases very well. All right, so no questions at this time, but plenty of thank yous in the chat for you on your diligent, comprehensive work that you did this semester. Thank you so much, ladies. One more time, everyone. The NYU Wagner team, send out your congratulations. Thank you again. Beautiful. Oh, there is a question. Oh, okay. This is for the others. What do we think of the team's recommendations? And we're going to get there right now. So thanks again to the NYU Wagner team, Leah, Katerina, and Brittany for all of your hard work and for just collating all of these results and presenting them so well for us today. Thanks again. So we're going to move on, lots of claps and lots of thank yous in the chat as well. And we're going to move on right now to currently deployed solutions. And joining me for that are music educators Whitfield Chopin, Keith Jordan and Eric Lemon. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
So we've got some questions for you. We've got all of you on there. Awesome. Can
Nice.
you tell us, we're talking about the currently deployed solutions. Can you tell us, since you are music educators, about the music offerings that you lead at your respective schools?
Keith, you want to start?
Oh, sure. Okay. My name is Keith Jordan. Good morning, everybody. I know some people here personally. I teach currently at Francis Lewis High School. I believe that's District 26. I taught in Far Rockaway 8 years. Before that, in elementary school 147 and 95 before that. What's currently going on in my school is they have a big music program considering a non specialized school. So like right now I have an honors concert band, a junior band. I teach 4 beginning guitar classes. There's a string ensemble or orchestra, more of an ensemble, a choir, and they have 2 or 3 beginning piano classes. So, I mean, it's a big program. I think it's a big program because mostly the parents want it. Most of the kids coming in, they're coming from good junior high school programs. So then they just continue. Also, the principal to a point supports it too. I think that those factors are very, very important. And for me, I don't like when they say, like Ms. DeBray was saying, in 59, they changed their perspective of where the money should go into academic courses. I don't like that word because music is academic too.
Academically rigorous, absolutely.
I think it's more academic than what they consider academic. Now we have to follow a Danielson type of program for teaching. And when you're teaching music, especially instrument.
For those who are not familiar, Keith, can you tell us about Danielson? I also want Whitfield and Eric to chime in as well.
I think they basically it's like 21 things you should be doing when you're teaching. Assessing the kids assess themselves, not to dumb it down, but blah, 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 blah. So in music class, it's automatic if you're teaching an instrument, because the minute someone picks up the instrument and they try to play it, you're assessing them, they're assessing themselves, and the students around them subconsciously are assessing them. So that's why I don't consider it. That's why I consider it academic.
So, and Whitfield and Eric, if you could tell us also about the music offerings at your respective schools.
Yeah, actually, I went to school with Keith teaches now at Francis Lewis High School, but that was some 50 some odd years ago. But I teach in this beautiful campus called the Glen Oaks campus here in Southeast Queens, District 29. And like in my experience, I'd never had the instruction or the guidance of a lesson plan. I'm a musician that's in the field like Keith, and I performed. I've been blessed with some great work in my years, and I can bring that to the stage. I can bring that to the classroom, and it gets the kids very exciting. You know, musician that's been on TV, etc. But I never had to have this lesson plan deal. I just give them what I know is effective. They live here in Southeast Queens. They have to do a book report on these great people that lived in Queens, like Fats Waller and Count Basie and John Coltrane, as well as learning the fundamentals. They have to listen to Beethoven for 30 seconds, 90 seconds. And the results are incredible. You know, it's amazing. You never see a violinist in a street gang. And these kids know the deal. They just can't get enough resources to have enough. I have a large school. I think I'm the only Black face in the school. It's a great school though. We have, I'm teaching an auditorium, and I'm teaching what I want to teach from K to 8. So we have basic stuff going on, basic, how to count, how to sing a solfege, how to sing in pitch. And the instruments all over, I keep the drums out because every kid's a half drummer. We all got feet, we all can keep time. So you can't get to my class unless you can keep time on the drum set, unless you can listen to a Lester Young solo. And like I said, mention all these great iconic people that lived in our community. I grew up here in Jamaica, Queens. I went to IA 72, which is now Count Basie. And didn't know who Count Basie was then. I didn't know he was the most important big band, jazz orchestra, one of the best, most effective. And it's a trouble in school at the time. There was a lot of crime, a lot of things going on, but we still had 3 music teachers, not 1, 3. I'm one of the only music teacher in my school, and most of the kids don't get a chance to have the music class. So I'm walking around like I'm the Pied Piper because they can't let me walk by without screaming my name, without grabbing me, hugging me. It's not me, it's the music. It's the music. They want to hear more. They want to see more. They want to look at Billie Holiday's face again. Yes, she lived in your neighborhood. Yes, Ella Fitzgerald lived in your neighborhood. Yes, John Coltrane lived off Linden Boulevard. These are the most important people. They were the gods. And we got a chance to share this. And of course, it doesn't require the Danielson report. It requires just what I say. When I grew up, I went to Count Basie's house as a kid. We sat at the pool, and my father owned the cab company that picked him up. So this is in me, and I have to continue to share it with them. And they want it. They love it. I always thought that the kids, when they lined up, they should be listening to Johann Sebastian Bach or Mozart. When they're in the bathroom, the music should be piped in, and watch the effects. It has lasting effects and always will.
And Eric, remind us again, in District 26, what school are you at?
Oh, that's 29. That's IS 208, PS IS 208, which is adjacent to 2 other schools. 266, which is funny enough is another district, but they're still
next to each
adjoining
other.
schools, Then the high school right attached to it. So it's a wonderful campus. Is it perfect? No, I think out of 3 schools, there's probably 1 music teacher, and I'm it,
And Whitfield, we want to bring you in too. Don't think you're getting away that easily. Tell us about the music offerings in your school.
Okay, well, I'm just fascinated and just having the opportunity just to be able to work with students. And basically what I do in my school, I started off there I also started off doing guitar ensemble when I came there. I already had another teacher who was there doing chorus. I worked along with that chorus teacher, who also actually had drama and also dance there as well. So we had a good program going. And then I was fortunate to be able to get keyboards to start a keyboard ensemble. So we did a keyboard ensemble. So our concerts would be chorus, drama, various dance, keyboard ensemble, recorder, and guitar. And that's what we would have. Later, I used to write my own curriculum. I would just however we have the blueprint, New York City blueprint, which tells us benchmarks by 2nd grade, they should know this. By 5th grade, they should know this. We have that. So I would write my own curriculum. But later on, where I started finding other programs, there were programs that out there that I would go to teachers' workshops, and they would say, oh, we're in this program, or you never heard of this program? And I said, what program is this? And so they introduced me to programs like Carnegie Hall Link Up, and where, the students now, my recorder's going to a different level because now they're learning stuff like Ode to Joy. Now they're learning O Fortuna and things like that. They're learning the same things that the orchestra would be learning. And then at the end of the school year, they travel to Carnegie Hall and to an interactive concert where they're not just sitting down, they're actually playing along with the orchestra. So they look forward to this because this is something that every day we are working, and it teaches them how to read music, how to count scores, things like that. So it's a great program. Then I landed into another program called Music in the Brain, which is a great program as well. This goes off of the research that kids learning music actually enhances their learning, actually enhances brain function. All right. So, and this program is very comprehensive. It has a whole lot. It teaches them how to read music. So my kids love to do it every single day. Not only does it enrich them, not only does it help them academically, but it is fun for them to do. And the other program that I actually do is called another program called Little Kids Rock, where they provide drums, they provide guitar, bass, they provide microphones, keyboards, all that stuff. It's all about the modern band. And I'm able to do their songs. And so what I do is, I'll say, okay, what songs do you want to do? What songs are out there that you want to do? And so we would do anything from maybe a Stevie Wonder tune, Alicia Keys. We do Lean on Me. We've done We Shall Overcome, and we would have like a band together. But these are things that they love. So whenever I see them in the hallway, when are we going to have practice? When are we going to get together? Things like that. And it just,
the energy, the excitement. Remind us again, Woodfield, where are you teaching right now?
I'm teaching at PS 176 Queens.
Right down the street.
Cambria Heights.
Yes. Yeah. And Keith already answered this question. He said because the parents clamor for it. So in the few moments we have left, Whitfield and Eric, why do your schools have music programs and other schools don't, in your opinion?
Well, Lemon, you go ahead.
Yeah, I think I came here with the program was already running. It's funny, my kids went to the same school where I teach. I come out of mostly the Brooklyn schools, Brownsville, Crown Heights. My first time chance to work in Queens, I had to grab it because I grew up in Southeast Queens. And I asked them, they're bragging, we got this great Spanish program, we got the computer this. And then I raised my hand. This is before school started. And I was not a teacher at the time. I says, well, what about the music program? And they looked at me in horror. They says, oh my God, we don't have a music program. All this stuff we're bragging about. The next day they grabbed somebody, so because I raised my hand, they hired somebody. But fast forward, I ended up becoming the guy that replaced him. And I think, if it took forced parents to yell about it, I think that made a difference. Somebody said, I grew up with music, I need it in my school. Why don't you have music? Why don't you have music? And the Haitian, the beautiful brother was from Haiti that ran the school, and he has a background of music in his family, in his history. So I think it made a difference. Those 4 or 5 parents.
And Whitfield, why does your school, in your opinion, have music and others don't?
I think it also is the vision of the principal too, as well, and the parents as well. I was in Brooklyn as well, and the principal there wanted to have a music teacher as well too. So I was fortunate for that. And whatever I wanted, they would actually, the assistant principals would actually say, okay, well, let's get that. But when I wanted to come to Queens, the principal there was like, well, we're looking for a music teacher. And they previously had a music teacher as well. So I think it's a vision also of the admin, the parents to say, we want to continue this on. We're going to have this line open to have a music teacher, to have a drama teacher, to have an arts teacher, whatever, and I believe the funding is there. It's just what do you do with that? And what decision do you want to make? Do you want to have that in your school, or do you want to have that for something else? So I really believe that it's the admin, and I believe parents really advocating for that as well.
Thank you, Keith Jordan. Thank you, Whitfield Chopin. And thank you, Eric Lemon, for sharing with us currently deployed solutions. We really appreciate all of the solutions and the reasoning behind your music programs in your respective schools. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to switch gears just a little bit and talk to Southeast Queens Music Education Task Force Summit member, Anne Marie Hudley Simmons. We have just one question for you. Good morning again.
Good morning.
And you can turn your camera on if you like. So Anne Marie Hudley Simmons, thanks again for joining us with this one quick question. We're looking at envisioning a music-filled future. What could the future look like, and how might we get there? Have you seen music rebound in districts?
No, I have not. I am so thrilled that Whitfield, and by the way, Whitfield was also a student of mine when I taught in '59, a member of that 275-piece chorus that sang at 8-part harmony. But no, I don't see that in the city happening, particularly not in. Someone mentioned before that we have the blueprint for the arts. We also have the New York State standards, and New York City school students cannot even compete. We cannot even sit down and be evaluated by those because we don't have it in our schools. I have been serving in Nassau County for the last, I would say 15 or 16 years. And every school has all of what the students need in New York City, from the first grade, from kindergarten through 12th grade. And in Freeport, I actually built the program from K through 12. So everything was sequential, everything was layer upon layer. So by the time they got to high school, they were playing, their bands sound like college bands, and their choruses sound like college orchestras, choruses. No, I have not seen that. I keep saying, and a lot of this was included in the report, that we have to, our strategies need to be, aside from the fact that we have to be committed to the fact that if our Black lives matter, if children in the inner city school matter, then we've got to do something about it. And when there's a commitment, the budget is not an issue. We need to reach our parents' associations, of course. They need to know what needs to be happening with their schools. Of course, the professional development for our administrators, and then the power meetings with our activists, and thank God we have people like Speaker Lewis, connection with our pastors, our religious leaders, educational departments. We need to exhibit samples of what a student can do. And I think it was Keith who mentioned that child carrying a violin is not having a fight on the corner. If we could capture those students, as a matter of fact, Gail, if there was a way we could reach even our NBC, ABC, our news media, who are constantly showing the negative impact of what our students do on the street, if we could show through these news media the positive effect of what our students are doing, we need to turn the light on what's happening that is right and that may be able to create something. And as I said before, given the crime rate in our city, one would think that instead of Band-Aid approach, we would rid ourselves of the crimes by healing our land. And what better way to do that than connect to our culture, to the one thing that binds us, that heals us, that inspires us, that motivates us, that educates us? It's music. It's the academic subject that really keeps us together.
Thank you so much on sharing with us your vision of a music-filled future. And it keeps coming up again and again today. That kid with the violin is not the kid, getting into the fight on the corner. So thanks again for your music-filled future projections. Anne Marie Hudley Simmons. I'd like to ask Chris Tokar to join us right now with the Creative Arts team, Short-Term Solutions. Good morning, almost good afternoon. Good morning.
Morning, happy to be here. I think my video says it's unable to start. I don't know if that's something on my end or yours. Oh, and now it's fixed.
There you go.
Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to hear from all of you. As I sit here in one room, there is a piano playing happening in another in my house. So it really feels like the right environment. My name is Chris Tokar. I'm the Director of Resource Development at an arts and ed organization called Creative Arts Team. It lives within CUNY, and it's actually a theater-based organization. But I've also, and I do fundraising there. I'm basically responsible for raising our $3 million budget every year. And my history of work in development has been with many music organizations as well. So everything you're talking about is very familiar to me. I was asked by Greg to share some resources, some funding resources. As he said, some that are known and some that aren't known. But this is a very knowledgeable group, so I don't think anything I'm going to tell you is real news, except that I really wanted to point out some very specific opportunities that are happening now that are more in the line of what the NYU Wagner team was talking about, supplemental arts programs. Rather than, the deep advocacy you're talking about is really structural and getting, academic subject music into schools. And I think that that's an excellent goal. The opportunities I'm talking about really have more to do with what can be done right now, some short-term funding opportunities. And these aren't just supplemental, but I think they can be the ignition to motivating parents and school leaders to take on the deeper mission that you're really talking about. So if you don't mind, should I share some slides or should I just speak with you?
If you have slides, we would love to see them.
Sure, I do. I have some slides.
I will make sure that you can share your screen.
Okay. And I will make it big. I'm going to run through them super quickly at the front because, again, as I say, I think that many of the people here are familiar with some of the resources I'm mentioning, but they're here, and I'll share this with everybody through Greg, if that's okay. I think when people think of funding, they immediately think of private foundations. In my experience, getting private funding for school-based programs is pretty rare. I think your larger enterprise is one that might be of interest to a foundation where you're building a coalition of across different sectors to advocate for deeper music education. But that's a whole other conversation. But just immediate funding to get programs in schools. The one foundation I know who does some funding on that level is the Pierre and Tana Matisse Foundation. And then there's some other foundations that are really around to provide support in musical instruments. And those are listed here. The DOE's own resources, are changing and shifting, I think, all the time, but I think it's always valuable to go onto the DOE website and see what's happening there. In some cases, it is sort of support for new art teachers once you get across that threshold of getting arts teachers in the door. And I don't know if everyone here is aware of the DOE Office of Arts and Special Projects, but I just thought I'd drop those in as well. These are borough arts directors who I think it would be very useful to have in your larger conversation, as well as the music arts director at the DOE to help, push your mission forward. But the funding I'm really going to talk about has to do with arts partners. As I said, the organization I'm with, Creative Arts Team, we do a tremendous amount of work in schools. Again, this is drama, so it's not exactly speaking to what you're talking about today. But these are organizations that are set up to get funding from other sources. So the arts partners, some of which have been mentioned by Mr. Whitfield, are like Modern Band or Little Kids Rock, or they're programs that are getting funding to bring programs to schools. So they're probably already nonprofits, 501c3s. They're probably New York City DOE vendors, which means that they can tap funding specifically to go into schools. And they have a mission to address exactly the problem you're talking about. So, and they're actively pursuing funding through New York State Council on the Arts, through the Department of Cultural Affairs, private grants, the City Council, and the Arts Partnership grants, which I'm going to be talking about next. And they need partners like your schools. I did want to pause just for a second and say that my organization actually has had a multi-year partnership with a Southeast Queens school, the High School of Construction Trades, where we've been doing a program, a drama program, and it's after school, but it's pretty robust. And it was funded for its first few years through a grant the school got from the Matisse Foundation. And then we were able to go to the council member in District 28, Speaker Adams, who has been continuing that work by funding it through a CASA program, a Cultural After School Adventures program. So that's just a case study of a long-term arts partnership that's been funded both through private funding and through City Council. So I don't know if you all are aware of this, but right now is the time to apply for the arts partnership grants. I don't know if folks on this call have experience with that, but these are grants that are awarded each year by the DOE. So I was just looking at the chat to see if there was a question for me. The DOE has this competitive grant program each year, and there are two entry points. One is an arts for multi-language learners and students with disabilities. And basically it's a $15,000 award to bring an arts partner in to the school to work with students. And they're looking for you to be sure that the multi-language learners and students with disabilities are included proportionate to the population of the school or more. And there's also an arts and family engagement grant, which is really a way to engage parents. So this opportunity is open now until the 31st of the month. It's a very easy application, and all you need, the schools have to apply for it directly. And it's one of the few grants where a school actually is the applicant. But you need a partner. And so how do you find the arts partner you would work on with this? At the same time, there's also this a fair happening right now, or will be happening this month, called the ACES Fair. So this is the DOE's Office of Arts and Special Projects, Arts and Cultural Education Services Week. And it's basically, it's kind of like a trade fair where the arts vendors gather by discipline, and it's remote, it's virtual this year. And you have an opportunity to speak to these different partners. Now, the vendors are there in the hopes that the school will hire them. But as I said, all of these vendors, and we'll be there as a drama vendor, we all are looking for partnerships with schools. And even though, we have programs that we can bring in if you pay us, but we also have opportunities like the Arts Partnership Grant that we would love to be your partner on. And so there are cost-free ways to bring these vendors into your school. And it's really a conversation with them. Say, we would love to have you come do music at our school. We don't have a budget, or we have a very limited budget. Where are places we can work together to get funding to bring you in? And I can guarantee you'll get a reception from the representative. I'm speaking quickly and I'm throwing a lot of information out there. And one of the reasons I did a slideshow was you could take it away with you. So if I'm going too fast, forgive me. But I just also wanted to mention, I know you have city council representation at this meeting, and perhaps they've already spoken of this. I wasn't on when they were speaking, but I did just want to point out a couple of the programs that have helped bring us to schools have been CASA, the Cultural After School Adventures Program, the Cultural Immigrant Initiative, and discretionary funding from council members. And these are all pots of funding that are part of the discretionary budget process, and the applications are usually open in February. So if you're in communication directly with your council member, and I really encourage you to be, and you're talking to them about your need for arts in the schools, you should ask about, what about these specific programs. And again, you should connect with an arts partner who you think would be a great provider of those services. And together, the arts partner can apply as a 501c3 and can name you as their very specific partner, and would need to name you as a specific partner for a CASA specifically. And if you're telling the council member as your constituent, this is what I want, the arts partner is much more likely to be funded to do that work with you. Another place to connect with arts partners is the New York City Arts and Ed Roundtable. This is a service organization that is advocating for a lot of what you're advocating for, but from the cultural organization side. It's a great resource to look at and just sort of poke around on their website. They often are the ones who communicate really well about some of these funding opportunities coming out of the DOE or other places that can benefit schools and arts partners. And finally, in that, if you look at the New York City DOE Arts Partnership grant application, they link you to places where you can see arts partners who are New York City DOE vendors who can be your partners for this grant. One of them is the ACES guide that's on the New York City website, and the other is Arts Vendors. So all of the the vendors who are eligible through New York City DOE, but you can link onto that through that application. But all of those, to access that list, you have to be, you have to have access to the DOE vendors list. So you have to be on school staff and have access to that database. So some of these are geared towards school leaders, but as advocates, you can support those school leaders by volunteering to help them navigate through some of this. I know a lot of schools that work that way too. So that's the chunk of information I really wanted to bring. And I just wanted to see if there were any questions about all of that or anything else I can answer.
I don't see any questions specifically about that right now. I do see a lot of chat about excitement with these funding opportunities. So thank you for bringing that. Even our own Greg Mays did not know about some of these. So thank you, Chris, for all of that information. If anyone has any questions, they can put them in the chat. Before we move on to our elected officials, we do have a few more comments. But before we get there, thank you again, Chris Tokar, for all of those funding opportunities and for breaking them down for us. We appreciate it. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Thank you. So before we do get to the elected officials, we do have one more comment, and that is from a retired principal's perspective. And that's with Pat Mitchell. She's recently retired from PS 48. And we'll make Chris's information available, of course, as well with her PowerPoint presentation. So let's bring Pat Mitchell on. Good morning, Pat, or good afternoon now almost. Hi, Pat.
Yes. Hi, how are you, Ms. Lewis? And so good morning to everyone who's here and the SEQMET members. This task force is amazing. And thank you, Greg, for asking me to chime in. You are consistently amazing. So thank you. For this initiative is so important. And I've been listening since 10 a.m. And I am both encouraged and a little ashamed that we're still having these conversations about the savage inequalities that still exist in our New York City's public school systems. So I guess the question is, how do I feel about this, having recently retired from the DOE? I can tell you that there are absolutely nuances that principals face in trying to get music education in their schools. I can tell you that I tried for years to get a quality music education teacher at the now David Dinkins School for Community Service. So what happens when a principal doesn't get the music teacher that they want? There's a line open for a special or a prep, whatever you want to call it, and we have to fill it. So what usually happens is we get someone who may be certified in PE. So we hire them because we don't want to lose the money. We don't have a music teacher that we sought for. The music teacher's there. After 3 years, guess what? Teacher is tenured. They have the right to stay there. Now that line is dried up. So what was purposed money for a music line is now dried up. Now I have a PE teacher and no more money for a music teacher. So those are the kind of little things that happen that we have really very little control over. What needs to happen, and I'm so happy, the NYU students, I used the word when I was principal, y'all were gangster. That presentation was gangster. And it really brought to light the disparities that still exist, even in Southeast Queens. I can't. But what I love about this forum is that this is not just us talking about the problems, it's solution-based, right? So one of the solutions is clearly we need to have some funding that's available to schools, even at the elementary level, to introduce music and music appreciation to our scholars. Now, that cannot happen without having the state mandate that we have music education. The state knows the data that we were just given access to. There's an art survey that principals have to fill out every year. So that someone has this data. What they're doing with it, I don't know. So we have to report to the state how many hours of arts education our scholars are getting, right? for every part of the school year. So someone has this data. They know the disparities that exist. They understand the inequalities that exist, and nothing's being done about it. So I really feel like Brittany's presentation about the history of funding really needs to be revisited. And we need to look at how we're funding our schools, right? There are also music teachers who won't even come to Southeast Queens for an interview. Last I counted in District 28 alone, I believe that there were between 6 and 8 licensed music teachers in the entire middle school population, right? That's sad. So that's something that we have to address. And I think principals have absolutely are stakeholders in this, and they absolutely have a moral imperative to give our students what they need. And Adrian's right, we need to be held accountable. But I also think it's important for parents to understand how important music education is to their babies, to the scholars that attend our schools. And maybe if they knew that, they would advocate more or insist that schools that their children attend have music education as a priority. And as we know, music education absolutely supports better comprehension, retention, memory, mathematical skills, just your ability to engage with other people, to self-express. So I don't need to go on. Everyone here, I think, understands the assignment. We understand how important music education is. So Greg, you're going to make me come out of retirement because this cause is important and the disparities are real. So I'm here for you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, retired Principal Pat Mitchell, for your thoughts and sharing your ideas with us this afternoon. So we have one more part of the program, and that is to hear from our elected officials. We heard earlier from Speaker Adrian Adams, and now I'd like to welcome State Senator Leroy Comrie from the 14th District. And I do see that Assembly Member Khalil Anderson is on the call, if he's available. We'd love to have his thoughts as well. And Assembly Member Anderson, of course, is from the 31st District. I did see Assembly Member Alicia Hyman on a little bit earlier, but I think she had to disconnect for a little bit. So if so, right now, the floor is yours. State Senator Leroy Comrie, flanked by flags in the background. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I didn't know parents were retired, but that just hit me. So, Principal Mitchell know that you retired. So, you know, that's a big loss to our educational system. So, but God bless you for your service and your time. You're truly a blessing to PS48. And I hope that I know you're continuing to mentor other people and so that they could be effective educators as you were. So I just want to take the time minute and say that. I came on the program about 20 minutes ago, so I didn't get to hear everyone. I can just let you know that the history of funding for the schools had been, on a state level, have been unbalanced because we did not have a Democratic majority in the state Senate. So there was always, as you know, the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, which was a 10-year fight just to get schools fully funded at the level that they're supposed to be funded. And we just achieved that final full funding in this budget of this year, where the Campaign for Fiscal Equity funding is fully realized. There has been a major issue with the levels of funding anyway, because since the Bloomberg era, they have been funding schools according to the actual number of bodies in the school with the same amount of dollars that would go to a school from the Upper East Side, that would go to a school like PS48 or PS116. They needed extra resources because of the types of children that were going in and out of school, the number of children that start the school year and end the school year is vastly different than what happens in other parts of the city. So there's a real need to change the funding equity formula that has happened. We just became in charge of the state senate 2 years ago. So we're working now to look at those funding formulas and to look at everything that's happening, and also to look at how school accountability is being done. So we're just getting started. I'm excited that we have a schools chancellor that came from District 29, that grew up in his formative years in middle school and high school in District 29, that we have now a mayor that spent time in Southeast Queens and attended Bayside High School along with the speaker of the city council. So I'm looking forward to a real structural realignment on the city level or on the state level. Now there are a bunch of Black educators that have now decided to become lobbyists on the statewide level. That's a group that's led by Shango Blake. It's BEU, and I would invite you to get involved with that group also as we work to make change on the state level to try to make some things happen. So I know my brother, Assemblymember Anderson is on. I know he wants to say a few words as well. I'll just let you know that Assemblymember Hyman is covering for me at another event that's happening in our shared district. So she may not get back on because that event is right in their program stage as well. So I know she was on earlier, so I'll just let you know that the three of us on education issues, Brother Anderson and myself and Assemblymember Hyman, have been working with this group to try to make sure that by next year we have a real minority education agenda, working with the chancellor to make some things happen. I'll turn it over to my brother Anderson.
Yeah. Assembly Member Khalil Anderson, thank you. And thank you, State Senator Leroy Comrie. Don't stick around.
Without a doubt. Thank you so much, Senator Comrie, and good afternoon to everybody who's on this call this afternoon. I'm Khalil Anderson, and I'm proud to represent the 31st Assembly District here in Southeast Queens. And I want to thank Brother Greg Mays and Gail Lewis and NYU Wagner for commissioning this task force and this study and producing this study. It really just shines a light on the disparities that many folk in the education space have been screaming about for quite some time. And I want to thank you, Senator Comrie, and my colleagues, Senator Sanders and Assemblywoman Hyman, for our work on the state level in looking to, like the senator said, untie the state funds that have been tied to a lawsuit as it relates to the Campaign for Fiscal Equity dating all the way back to the 1990s. I had asked a question in the chat for our folk at the NYU Wagner school, and my question was, there were some proposed legislative fixes by the task force, and I wanted to just dig into that a little deeper to see what those proposed fixes are, because it's my understanding that music is a requirement on the high school level. I know that when I graduated high school in 2014, not too long ago, we were required to take music, and it was music history. We took that music history course as one of the required elected. So it was either music, dance, or I believe it was like gym or something physical activity related. So I'm just wondering if that's still a requirement or not, and is it also a requirement or not on the middle school and elementary school level? And if it's not being enforced, what sort of accountability mechanism can we put in place for our folk who decide budgets within the schools? And that's our principals primarily, and I think with some level of engagement from our superintendents. That's my first question. And the second question, and Senator, I think we could work on this together. On the city level, we have CASA funding. And I know that folk talked about this, the CASA funding that the city council members get. But I'm wondering if there is a dedicated stream of funding that we could either establish or create or establish that would go to promote more music education being in our schools. Because, while accountability is critical, if our folks don't have the tools, our folks meaning our principals and school decision makers, don't have the tools to actually ensure that there are music education programs or music programs, in their school districts, how do we then ensure that there's a stream of funding that exists so that, music education happens? And, those are my two questions that I just want to pose as we're, digging for solutions, but the solutions are right here in this room. And I, again, want to thank my Senate colleagues, Senator Comrie, and to all of our folks who attended this important call on Saturday. I stayed on the call. I've been on since about 10:30 this morning, but running between other Zooms and just listening here and there. I just really appreciate you all's attentiveness to this. And, we're going to continue to work and figure out how we could address this disparity.
Could we ask that question to Senator Comrie, if there is that funding on the state level? And if not, could it be established?
You have to work to establish it, which is why I would encourage folks to get involved with BUs to start doing the lobbying to try to make that happen. We just got to equity funding for Campaign for Fiscal Equity funding because we had a Republican majority. Those types of extras were never done for municipalities, but you would see they were being done in Long Island and upstate. So we have to work to do the imbalance. So I would encourage folks that are interested to join BU. They were able to last year get a curriculum out of the city council for arts and also for curriculum. And that's something that we have to fight to do on the assembly level now that we have a majority. I don't want to be blatantly political, but we have to make sure that we keep a Democratic majority in both the Senate and the Assembly this year, especially in the Senate. With everything that has happened in the last week, I would really encourage folks to just, if we don't vote, we lose out on, just as we now have a majority conservative Supreme Court because we allowed Trump to be elected. We're going to lose 30 years worth of gains that we had done with Roe v. Wade. We got to get politically active on a local level in a major way this year. We can't afford to lose a Senate majority in the New York State Senate, and we can't allow the New York State Assembly to flip as well, because then we'll never be able to get these music education additions that we need for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Comrie. The ladies from NYU, if you are still on and could speak to, in just a few moments, we just have a few moments left, speak to Assemblymember Anderson's questions, if you are indeed on. And that's Brittany, Katerina, Leah. And if not, we will follow up with you for answers to those questions. So thanks again. So let me thank our local electeds for joining us today. That's State Senator Leroy Comrie, and also in absentia right now, Assemblymember Alicia Hyman, who joined us a little bit earlier, and Assemblymember Khalil Anderson. Thanks so much. And of course, Speaker of the New York City Council, Adrian Adams. So thanks again to all of you for
I just
joining
want to
us
say,
today.
Councilmember Brooks Powers was on as well, but she's also at the event that I'm not at in person, covering that. So I'm gonna actually jump off the line now and try to head on over there. Everyone stay safe on a wet Saturday. Happy Mother's Day to all. And thank you for putting this presentation together. I look forward to delving into the report and getting back to you, Sister Lewis, and Brother Mays and your team, so I can try to be helpful in my role to see what we can do to improve music education in Southeast Queens. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all the electeds who joined us today. I forgot about Councilwoman Sylvina Brooks Powers, so thanks again. Thanks, Assemblymember Anderson as well. I'd like to bring on Greg Mays to close us out for today. Good afternoon again, Greg Mays. Greg Mays, founder of A Better Jamaica. We heard a lot today. We unpacked a lot. First, I'd like to start by thanking everyone who joined us today on the call, all of the attendees who came and went all day long, and most especially our panelists today, everyone who spoke, everyone who helped in the preparation, everyone who compiled and gave us results. They include our NYU team, that's Katerina, Brittany, and Leah, all from the NYU Wagner School. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. Charles and Carl Bartlett, the Bartlett brothers, who are cornerstones of Southeast Queens music. Patricia Baskerville, I Am Not Worthy. The list goes on and on. Whitfield, is he still on the call? Yes, he is. Whitfield, thank you so much for all of your insight. As well, Barbara Banks-Deberry. I don't know if everyone was reading the chat, but there's something that I did learn today. This music community in Southeast Queens is intergenerational and very intertwined. We see someone saying, that was my music teacher. I learned from this person. I follow that person. That person has been an inspiration in music, and it's all coming from Southeast Queens. So Barbara Banks-Deberry, thank you again for all of your insight. Anne-Marie Hudley Simmons, again, heartfelt thank you, thank you, thank you. Keith Jordan, not on the call anymore, but thank you again. And of course, Chris Tokar, who just gave us a lot of information about funding as well. Greg Mays, come on up.
Yeah, Gail Lewis, thank you, before I forget, for being just such an expert host. It's always good to see you in action. I'm not going to just sort of repeat the same names that Gail just sort of mentioned. I'll add a couple. Erica Foldy is the faculty advisor from NYU Wagner. Really did a great job of just sort of giving us an opportunity to present to the NYU students and then be selected as or for their capstone project. So thank you, Erica, for that. Obviously, thank you to Speaker Adams, who did, I don't know if she mentioned, a Southeast Queens, born and raised native. Who else? Yes, to Chris Tokar for sure, to Pat Mitchell, one of my favorite people on the planet, to Eric Lemon, behind the scenes, Mr. Norman Anthony Small, just sort of making the technology happen. Great guy. Who else? Just all these folks. I would just like to point everyone to a book. And I forgot the name of the author right now. It's called The Sum of Us. And it is a brilliant book, and it talks about the correlation between the presence of melanin and the disappearance of funding. And it is, it's a fantastic book. And I think that I recommend it highly to everyone. And it ties right into what Brother Carmi was talking about, the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, which was a lawsuit that happened decades ago. And it's taken this long. Thank you, Tom, for putting that in the chat. It's taken this long for folks to get control of the Assembly and the Senate so that we can finally implement some of the financial just sort of changes that were prescribed, coming out of this lawsuit. So I am really fantastically pleased that he brought that up. And I'm going to really just encourage us to do what he said, which is to vote, vote, and vote, because he is absolutely right. If we voted, to the extent that we should, then many of the outcomes that we have experienced would not have been experienced. So I encourage everyone to just sort of go out and vote. So what else? If you registered for the webinar, we'll be able to just sort of share some of the resources that were shared here, including the PowerPoint and the like. I think you can still register. I'll try to put some of them on the A Better Jamaica Facebook page. what else, Gail? Am I forgetting anything or anybody? You know,
I also wanted to say thanks to Professor Tom. He was so active today in bringing everyone together and in sharing resources as well. So thanks, Professor Tom.
Yes, yes, yes. And apologies to a couple of folks who were just sort of, wanted to just sort of, get on the stage, if you will, and share some of their wisdom. We do have a time constraint and we gotta, unfortunately just move on. It is, we have so much more power than we understand. And it is really time for us to exert that power. If we cannot make changes with a first female governor, who is a mother, and that's the most important part there, and maybe your grandmother, with control of the assembly in the hands, of a Black woman, with control of the state Senate in the hands of a Black man, with the New York City mayor being a Black man from Southeast Queens, with the speaker being a Black woman from Southeast Queens, with the police commissioner, having spent significant time in Southeast Queens. If we cannot make these changes now, then my fear is that we'll never be able to make these changes. And it is really, really important that we make these changes now. Part of this is me raising my hand saying, when I move on to the great beyond, we run the risk of forgetting or not understanding how robust music education used to be. And we can get it back there if we can add an additional grade in the form of UPK, to our Department of Education, then we can bring robust music education back. So I'm going to just sort of shut up there and not get on my soapbox anymore. But I really, really appreciate everyone who has come on, the task force members that Gail identified, and everyone else. So with that, I will say thank you, and we will close out this webinar. So thank you again.
Thanks, Greg. Good night, everyone.
Excellent job. Excellent job.
Good night. Good night.
Good night. Excellent job.
Yes, beautiful.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
That's right, guys. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Yes.
Honor.